Welcome back to State of the Union. This winter, as President Biden warned that Russia was planning an attack on Ukraine, one of the big fears here at home was cyber attacks. That hasn't happened on a large scale yet. Here with me is the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you about cyber in a minute, but first let's talk about the president's big speech yesterday in Poland. He said many things about autocracy versus democracy, but then he ad-libbed at the end saying that Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power. The White House has clarified that since, saying that the administration does not support regime change. Do you think that statement did any damage?
Well, Dana, there is one individual that's trying to make regime change in Europe, and that's Vladimir Putin trying to change the regime in Ukraine. And I candidly agree with the Ukrainian prime minister, who really has been extraordinary. We, and not just we, but countries around the world have called out Putin as a war criminal. He has been sanctioned by many, many nations. We're trying to kick him out of the G20. Now, at the end of the day, the regime in Russia will be determined by the Russian people. And I hope the Russian people will make those decisions going forward. Clearly, Putin has overplayed his hand in Ukraine. Russian forces are reeling. And I think that's partially because they know they are involved in an illegal war. But it'll be up for the Russian people to make that decision. One thing also that I think that the Ukrainian ambassador made clear, and I see this as I travel around Virginia, this is so much bigger than a war between Russia and Ukraine. What the Ukrainian people in many ways are doing are fighting with their lives for the kind of basic freedoms that we take for granted. Freedom of the press, freedom to agree and disagree, having your votes counted. I hope we all as Americans realize what is at stake here and continue to show this united support for Ukraine.
But as a senior American elected official, do you believe that the stated policy should be regime change in Russia or not?
I think that the stated policy, as the White House has pointed out, has not changed. It is up to the Russian people to determine who is going to be in power in the Kremlin. But we have someone who has put Russia into the status of a pariah nation, who most of the civilized world has called out as a war criminal. And clearly the Russian troops are not performing as if they were following a legitimate approach.
So let's talk about cyber. You have been warning for years, screaming from the rooftops about cyber attacks. President Biden said this week that Russia's cyber capacity is, quote, fairly consequential, and it's coming. Can you describe what Russia and what their plans vis-a-vis a cyber attack on the U.S. would look like on businesses, on infrastructure, on government?
Well, let's break this into two categories. I mean, first of all, we do know the Russian cyber capabilities are top-notch. We've been the victim when we see the Russian cyber criminals, like the Colonial Pipeline that had us have gas lines a year ago, and many, many other Russian cyber attacks. The first thing I've been surprised at is that the Russians have not launched their A-team cyber attacks against Ukraine. It's remarkable to me that the internet is still operating and that world press is still getting these images out of Ukraine. I was horribly afraid that Russia would come in and shut down all the power systems, shut down the internet, and that some of those cyber tools would bleed into eastern Poland and literally potentially shut down power.
Why haven't they?
We don't honestly have a good answer yet.
Really?
And
U.S. intelligence doesn't know?
I don't think it's lack of capability, but this is a question that we are constantly posing. Now, did they think they were going to win too easily? Some of these cyber tools, when you put them into the wild, they don't respect geographic boundaries. You don't really know what would happen with cyber escalation. Maybe they've been saving them to use against us. So I do think President Biden is correct in saying Americans need to be ready. We have increased our shields. Finally, Congress passed a law that he signed that requires if you are attacked in a cyber domain, you got to report to the government so we can share with private sector partners. But I think particularly in the finance sector and the energy sector, we need to be prepared because an A-tier offense can oftentimes overcome a defense. The question is, how quickly can we then stand back up our systems?
So you say Americans need to be prepared. If Russia does launch a cyber attack against America or any NATO country, would that trigger Article 5, which is an attack on one NATO country is an attack on all? And would that require a response?
Well, there are cyber attacks from Russia and China going on a daily basis for years.
So when and how should the
But
U.S. respond?
in terms of literally causing loss of life, there's always been what we call strategic ambiguity about what is defined as an Article 5 violation. I think that is still an appropriate grayness at this point.
When does it
But one
become unambiguous?
Well, I think that was what I was afraid of. If they'd shut down the systems in Ukraine and it bled into eastern Poland and hospitals were shut down and Polish citizens were dying, or American troops were in some kind of accident because the power systems go down and American troops are killed because of the reaction to a cyber attack, that gets us into an area where we are, again, in uncharted territory.
Crypto, one of the major concerns, is that Russia might be able to evade Western sanctions by using cryptocurrency. You just introduced a plan to try to stop Putin from doing that. Do you think that that is an active strategy right now in Russia?
I think digital currencies and distributed ledger have a great opportunity, but it's really very opaque at this point. For example, right now there are 10 major crypto exchanges around the world. 2 of them are based in America. So when we put our sanctions regime in place, those crypto exchanges got covered. The other 8 didn't. And what I'm worried about, whether the foreign crypto exchanges or what's called DeFi, decentralized finance, which is the wild west, that Russian leaders, oligarchs can find ways around some of our sanctions. So we're trying to simply put some rules in place, not to be against cryptocurrencies per se, but to make sure that they are not bleeding out their wealth through those tools.
Mr. Chairman, before I let you go, we are understandably very focused on Ukraine and on Russia, but I want to ask a question about Afghanistan, because the Taliban blocked girls above 6th grade from returning to schools on Wednesday, and that just happened just hours after schools were supposed to reopen for them. The State Department called it a betrayal. A top U.S. diplomat said, frankly, it caught us by surprise. Did it catch you by surprise as the intelligence chairman?
Nothing the Taliban does catches me by surprise. This is a brutal, awful regime. I saw some of the reports of girls terribly disappointed not being able to return to school. We need to keep the pressure on. I'm very proud of the fact that we in Virginia are actually, here in Loudoun County, are the place that is continuing to take in Afghan refugees. We're literally have gotten 130,000 people out of Afghanistan. We need to continue to make sure those refugees get a chance to resettle in America and around the world.
Senator Mark Warner, Chairman of the Intelligence Committee, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.